Jenna.
Hi.
Very, very nice to see you tonight. I was
Oh, you too.
debating if I was going to introduce you as Jenna Dyer from Set Apart magazine. So we could say that.
Yeah, yeah, that's fine.
And I mean, but your magazine is so new, and I remember when it was coming into existence, and everybody was super excited, and everybody remains super excited. And like
Oh,
that first run that you did, I think exceeded your expectations, if I remember correctly.
oh, it definitely did. I was really excited to embark on it. I didn't think that it'd be anything anybody really cared for. Maybe a handful of friends would entertain me and just, oh, I'll buy it from you and make me feel better. But it definitely took off, and I was very, very humbled by the response. So it's been wonderful, and it's kept me going.
And it is a work of art. Like it is really, it is just such an artistic endeavor. I was just trying to scramble. Do you have one in front of you somewhere close by?
Um, let's see here. I might.
Sorry, we could have planned that better. I was uh, I was looking in my usual place where it is sitting and I didn't. There we go. That's great. I think that'll be nice if you I don't know if you
Well,
flip through it.
the first and the second issue, the fall issue, did extremely well. All of these women who I put on the cover are people I know personally, and I know live a set apart life, and they walk with Yah, and their walk is so beautiful, and we're all just learning together. And so it's just wonderful to be able to put real people in walking this way in the magazine and very involved with all the, because we do a lot of talking in my fellowship. I go to Messiah's New Life Tabernacle in Avila, Indiana. It's a very lovely fellowship. And I just am always just, that's always the question. How did you come to this way? And what does your life look like? I think that when we first started, everybody was just hungering for an application. Like, how do I apply this life, growing up in the, even in the secular world where I grew up, mostly secular, um, there was still something special about Sunday in the secular world. So it is just such a shift in how your rhythm now works because everything, and then I went from, secular to then kind of an Amishy area where everything's closed down on Sunday. And so it's just a huge shift in how to apply this life now. So that's what I wanted the magazine to really help people with. And it's still just ever evolving. So
Well, congratulations. It's obviously was something that was so needed.
I
And
hope more come. I hope there's more resources, for all of us. We see so many, mainstream Christian resources everywhere we look, and I just hope there's just a uprising of creativity and curriculum and resources and fellowships everywhere.
well, I mean, people are coming in droves, and I mean, I'm no exception. I only opened the Bible 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago now, and
Yeah.
it didn't take
Oh,
me
wow.
too long to clue into the Torah
Mhm.
stuff. But even in the short time I've been here, I'm just watching this like people are coming in droves. People are waking up, and
Yes.
that was prophesied.
Oh, it
And it
is.
seems to be, I don't know if you've noticed the same thing. It seems to be women, wives are waking
It
up.
usually is the women first. Yes. I've had my theories about that.
Well,
So,
we can definitely talk about it tonight or at a later date. But I mean, I also have theories. It's something constantly on my mind, and there are a lot of unyoked women, unequally yoked women,
mhm.
whether
Yes.
they're single or their husbands are Christian or whatever it is, and it's super hard, and roles get flipped around, and
Mhm.
marriages suffer and
Right.
are sometimes destroyed over all of this. So yeah, we can.
Right. Because we're not meant to lead, but we feel like we have to pick up until our husbands could catch up. And it is. And I think that that was kind of that was the enemy's strategy. He wanted to enable the men, and then the fire started to lighten the women. And I just think that was Yah's way. And he will, when the men kind of fail, the women will rise up, but then we'll go back to our rightful zones. And so, and it's a blessing to see it unfold if it ever does unfold. I know some marriages, it's never going to happen that way for them, but there's always that hope it may. So,
I've seen it with my own eyes, and as I do tell women, the results. How can I say it? there's kind of two ways to go about it. There's to beat your husband over the head with the Torah,
Right. I think
and
that always happened at first. Yeah.
there's to walk out your
Mm,
own faith, and he will catch up. Just, I always think
right.
of do you know the Lee Strobel story?
Yes, those were some of the first books I read as a new Christian was The Case for Christ, The Case for the Creator, Case for Faith. Those are the first three books I remember I was so like, what is this Christianity stuff? And I love
I watched the movie made about his life, and when I sat down to watch it, I kind of knew there was something. I came from, Christ consciousness and the New Age, and I didn't really think
mm,
Jesus was a real
right,
person. And then I watched that movie, and I was like, oh wow, okay, that was
the
real.
proof.
Yeah,
Yes, the proof. And I love that some people do need that. They need that concrete proof. And I remember there's the opposite of the spectrum where it's like just faith, 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 faith. That's all you need. It's just faith. And some people want, the evidence. And I think we're all wired differently. It's a beautiful thing that Yah will still show us through his divine uh, nature and creation, the concrete proof. And I love that aspect too, because I'm both. I think there's a lot of faith I like to have, but then I like to have, well, look at all this cool evidence. Like this is mind blowing. Some of these numbers and figures and accounts. It's beautiful.
yeah.
So
So
yeah.
what did that look like for you when you were coming into, so go back maybe before reading those books. You said you grew up secular and then something about Amish stuff. What happened?
Yeah, that was more recent. But growing up, I grew up in Aurora, Colorado, very liberal area. My parents were not religious. My dad is still not religious. He is an agnostic, he'll say. He's like, well, maybe there's something out there, but I don't know. He's just one of those. And my mom was raised Catholic, but she never really raised us that way. So Catholic was the only influence I did have. It was kind of like they called us creasters. You'd show up on Christmas and Easter to mass, and that was about it. And we did that maybe a handful of times throughout our childhood. But I was familiar with mass. I did end up, growing up really rebellious. My sister, complete opposite of me, same set of parents, but she was very good. She was a goody two shoes, always trying to please mom and dad, and they were just kind of, in their own worlds. I never had any influence of Christianity. My mom, all her friends were working mothers. I never even saw any mothers nursing before. Just very secular, liberal upbringing, I guess. And so I guess let's see here. It's like where do you start? I don't even know where to start really, but um, I guess I could say when I was growing up, I was seeking negative attention. I feel like that was the only attention I really got, and so I kept doing bad things. I had got my tattoo with my best friend when I was only 13 years old, and I know it was shocking. But I grew up with a lot of like, how do you put this? I guess I mean we weren't like ghetto, but we were ghetto. Actually, I will I will say we were a little on the thug side of things, or we were wannabes, things like that. It was the era of Tupac and all those rappers and things like that. And that's what I fell into. And so I grew up with a lot of like Hispanics, and it was a melting pot. A lot of mixed people. The Hispanics really brought me into their fold because they just assumed I was one of them. I'm not Hispanic at all, but a lot of people think I am. And so I'm actually half black and half Italian. And but the black people didn't really want me in their group. The white people didn't want me in their group. So there I fell in line with all of the Hispanics. And so we really did my mic go off? I don't know if it did, but okay. So there was some bad crowds I got involved with. And so, yeah, we had gotten tattoos just at somebody's house. And, things that follow with that, I know it's terrible. I remember thinking, like, should I get tested for some things later? Like, because it was just prison style tattoos. And it's just terrible. And so, me and my best friend got little roses on our stomachs. And Is it
That was
okay?
me. I muted you as I was
Okay.
trying to unmute myself. I was just going to cut you off and say
Oh,
I have a 14-year-old and I'm horrified at the idea of her getting a home tattoo.
oh yes. I did get in trouble for it once it was discovered, but again, it was my parents, I will say they did the best they could, but they were busy. I felt like everybody's life was busy. My mom worked, my dad worked. There was lectures I got over it, but it was never, probably not what I would have done if I found out my daughter had a tattoo. I think I would just fly off the handle. And so again, it was just like that starving for attention. It's like I felt like I just got a tattoo and you guys still don't care. It's just kind of one of those things. And so I kept doing the bad things. I fell into alcohol. I fell into a lot of different drugs. I was smoking cigarettes by the time I was, 12 years old. And then it was a spiral, and it gets a little bit more serious. I I had gotten a lot of suspensions, and then I got expelled eventually from my middle school. And so my mom put me in like a Catholic school until high school, which the Catholic school was very private. I think there was like 5 people in my class, so it was very small. And so and that's where I got my second tattoo, which was again. And I told my mom I was going to youth group when I got it. So just that is just an idea of how naughty and rebellious I was. And I made a lot of friends along the way that once I did make the change years later, they were just shocked. They're like, this cannot be the same person. This is just bizarre. But then later on, I would gotten pretty heavily involved in ecstasy, lots of raves, lots of parties that lasted for just days on end. And I had ended up getting pregnant, and my mom, this was the one time I felt like she really was just traumatized, and she couldn't believe that she had let this happen and that we had gotten this far. Like we were so far removed from one another that now I'm 18. I was almost 18 and pregnant. And so she had taken me to get an abortion. And that's kind of where my story pivots, where I remember even being, my mom did smoke a lot of pot with me too. So that was kind of another reason why we really just had a friendship, but not a parent child relationship. It was definitely, I want to be your friend. I don't want to be your mom. And so after that, I remember spiraling out of control, like most women do when they undergo abortions and things like that. And so I had spiraled out of control, gotten into cocaine, never really gotten to meth, thank goodness, because that is very, very difficult to get off of. And so I was always the kind of person that said, okay, I need to save myself or I'm going to be dead. I'm going to be in jail. Something's going to happen. And I mean, I just know something was on the brink of happening terrible. So I got clean enough. And I remember I failed my first drug test, but I decided I'm going to join the military because that will just make sure that I stay clean because I really just wanted a savior, really. And I felt like that was going to be my saving grace from my mistakes. And so it took me about a month to get clean enough for a P test, and got a recruiter. I remember I went into the Air Force because in Colorado they're all lined up right next to each other. You have the Air Force, and then you'll have the Navy, the Marines, and then the Army, and they're all in the same building. And so first I walk into the Air Force, and they're like, and I had a couple more tattoos by this point. I had one tattoo on the back of my neck, and they're like, nope, I'm sorry, we don't take anybody with tattoos. And so I was like, oh darn, okay. So then I go next door, and I knock on the Navy's door, go in, and we go through the whole spiel. And he's like, "Oh yeah, that tattoo won't be a problem." Okay, and it's just getting me all, ready and signed up. And and of course, I kind of mentioned it to my parents, but again, they didn't believe me. That was just everything was fast paced, and they're like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, okay, Jenna, you're gonna go ahead and do that. Sure, you will." Just kind of laughed it off. And again, then I felt like challenged. I was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go ahead and do this and prove to them that I could do something better. And so then I told my parents, okay, well, this is the process, and I'm leaving in 2 weeks to boot camp. And you go through this whole process of, you take the ASVAB, you which is the test to get in to decide what your job's going to be, which my job landed on aviation ordnanceman, which is a very fancy title for something very, and it sounds a lot cooler than it is, but it was a bomb builder. Definitely not as fun as I thought it was going to be. But we'll get to that. And so I got in, we went through the MEPS program. I got in Halloween night. I remember October 31st. We step off the bus to go into boot camp. It was the most horrific experience of my life. I was like, immediately, what did I do? Just almost immediately thinking like, I've made the most terrible mistake and there's no going back. There's no backing out. And then, but I got through the process, and I'd like to mention in my faith journey, there was like this guy at the airport while I was getting on the plane to Great Lakes, Michigan, which is the naval boot camp. And there was this guy just waving these little orange New Testaments and with the Psalms and Proverbs. And he was just, repent, for the kingdom of God is at hand. And I was just like, a weirdo. Like, wow, that guy is just out there. And so he's just handing them out to everybody. And so as he gets to us, he's just handing them out, and he keeps shouting that phrase, repent, for the kingdom of God is at hand. No idea what the word repent even meant. I never even heard it before. And so I just was like, sure. I took it like, okay, stop yelling, and just packed it away. And so about a month into boot camp, it's 8 weeks long, but because I went to boot camp on Halloween, and then you have all the holidays, you get put on hold a couple weeks for these holidays. So I was on a little bit longer, unfortunately, for Thanksgiving, and you don't get a leave, but they just extend your time there so that your RDCs, which are the drill instructors, if you will, get to go be with their families. So they just hold you until all that vacation is done. So I remember feeling very lonely. I remember on Christmas Eve missing my family. And even though it wasn't the best family necessarily, not religious, we always had Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. We never talked about the resurrection, never talked about the birth of Christ in my house. It was always very secular, very big. My dad would make full towns and a huge Christmas tree. So it was always lovely. And it was just a big deal, but it was always very secular. So I remember just sitting in my rack, missing my family, and I found that little New Testament. And I just was like, we never prayed before, really. I did pray one time before when I got in trouble. And that's a whole nother topic. It was like when I was like 15. And that was the only other time I prayed because I was in big trouble. And I was really scared. And I felt like that was my first encounter with God. But then fast forward to my rack and boot camp, I'm looking through this New Testament. It sounds like nonsense to me. Like I'm not even receptive. I'm trying to understand what I'm reading, but I just was not getting it. But then again, I saw the phrase repent, and I was like, I want to find out what that means, because it's a kind of a word I've never heard before. I mean, I'm thinking it's something negative. I remember that's all I really thought, though, is that it means something bad, but I want to know what it means. And that was my first thought. And so finally, boot camp's over. We're just all traumatized, and we got our Navy stuff on, and we've gone through all the motions, and now we're headed off to A school to learn our rate, we called it, which is our career choice. And so I get sent to Pensacola, Florida, where I am now in aviation ordnanceman school, AO school, learning how to build bombs, which is just a fancy way to taking a fuse and screwing it into the nose of a bomb. And that was pretty much about it. That was my whole job. And so it's kind of like factory work, but it sounded a lot cooler than it was. So I was a little disappointed. But then I kind of partied through A school, and still just really didn't think much of that word again, but it lingered. It's like I filed it away, but I partied really hard through A school. Again, that like party girl came out, and I was just like, whatever. And so then I get my duty station, and it's San Diego, California, aboard the USS Nimitz. And that's a huge aircraft carrier. And so it's like a floating city. I mean, I think there's something like 5,000 people on board, if not more. So it's a big boat, lots of people, very scary. My experience in the military on that boat, I mean, was shocking to me because I just couldn't believe what I had done. My mind had shifted from this liberal upbringing to women should not be in the military. And I couldn't believe what I had done. I'm like, I should not be here. This is really dangerous. I have so many stories of women who like put them, they would, if they got mad at you, they'd try to put you in a really terrible situation. There was just a lot of corruption that you could see, and it was just a terrible place. So any chance I got, I tried to make sure I was not sleeping on that boat. I didn't want to sleep on the boat. I always tried to find somewhere outside to sleep, like, not outside like homeless person, but at a friend's, if they had an apartment, or if they had somebody, a couch, anything to sleep on, I would just want to go there. I didn't want to be on the boat, because I don't want to get too graphic, but if you're not falling into a certain category of, like, if you're not a homosexual, and if you're not somebody who sleeps around, then you are prey. You are targeted. It is just not safe for you there. It's
Sounds like
very,
jail.
oh yes, it very much is. It's a very good comparison, and there's really like nothing you could do about it. It was a dreadful place, for me. I'm sure some people had a different experience, but I just could not be there. I didn't want to be there. I felt very unsafe. So again, I did a little bit of partying. I had met a friend who, we had done a lot of couch hopping together because we both didn't feel very safe. And I was at a party. I was talking to, just again, just drinking, we're partying, and um, there was this guy there who was just paying a lot of attention to me. So I was just talking to him the whole time, and we were just laughing, and I was thinking, oh, what a nice guy, and these are all what we call ex-buds guys, which are Navy SEAL training dropouts. So I don't know in Canada if you've heard of the Navy SEAL program, but that program is pretty elite. And so those were the guys that kind of ended up getting rolled or dropped out of the program. But we just knew those were guys who were like on kind of the elite side of the military, but they just didn't make it. They weren't good enough to be a SEAL. And so I had gotten a call the next day, and it was a guy who said, hey, I got your phone number from your friend, and we're having another party tonight. Do you want to come by? Again, I'll come pick you up. And so I was like, okay, sure. And I'm thinking, oh, it's got to be the same guy that I was talking to the whole time, because I wasn't really paying attention to anybody else, and he wasn't paying attention to anybody else. So it has to be that guy. But again, we were partying. It was, uh, and I will say that even though I had prior one boyfriend, I was not a promiscuous person. So when I say party, I was not doing all of the things that maybe other women do. I definitely like to have fun, but I was not that way. So I tried to, and from that experience, I remember thinking, I don't want to ever get pregnant again. And I was really scared about messing around in those ways. So, anywho, I said, yeah, this is where I am. Come pick me up. And so this guy pulls up, and I open the door, and it's like this fast and furious car. It was like ridiculous. And I remember opening the door, and I was like, wow, you're not the guy I was talking to at the party. And so I was thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't get in, the car. And sorry. And I just was kind of nervous, but at the same time, I didn't really have a whole lot of discernment, or, I was still kind of a party girl. It's like, okay, well, let's go ahead and trust. So I got in the car, and I mean, he was very handsome. Not saying that that gets any points for anything. Definitely don't get in the car with strangers, folks. Not a good idea. I did see him at the party, though. So I knew that he was still affiliated with the same people there, But I just hadn't locked eyes with him, really. I hadn't talked to him at all. So I just was like, maybe he's taking me to the other fella. I don't know, whatever. So I get in the car, and then that guy became my husband. and and we have now almost 8 kids together, and we've been together almost 20 years. So that was how we met,
Oh,
and it was
I was hoping that's where the story was going. I didn't, you don't know when you go in the car with somebody what's going to happen. That's a very good outcome.
Yes, it was. And
And
I'm
find
very,
out how
again, like I see God's hand in it.
did you find out how he was the one that got sent? Like, had he had his eye on you? Is that like, how did he end up?
Yes. So it's almost as though he was trying to vet me through his friend. So
Uh,
his friend was asking me all the questions and like, seeing maybe if I'd be a good fit for his friend. Or I'm thinking, oh, this guy really likes me. And so I actually really, I'm so thankful because I'm like, well, I mean, I thought that you were kind of out of my league. So I didn't bother talking to you. And so it really worked out for me. And so it was, again, it's, I feel like God's hand was just in it the whole time. And I mean, his mercy, I know that some women get in terrible situations and doing what I was doing. I mean, I put myself in terrible situations all the time, just all the time. And his mercy, like when I look back, I'm like, oh my goodness, like what could have happened? That could have gone so wrong.
I want to
And
ask you a question, Jenna, and feel free not to answer it because it's a
okay.
theological question, and I don't always do this, but it just came to me now.
Mhm.
Because his hand was on you, and his hand is on
Mhm.
many people who should be dead by now.
Mhm.
We see
Yes.
through recording these testimonies where he has saved us.
Mhm. Yes.
So I almost want to ask how you feel about predestination or like what that means. Like if some of us
Okay.
really are his children and he know, I don't know. I'll just throw
Yeah.
it out with the word predestination and just
I
see.
know it's such a hard subject. It is one of those subjects that could get so sticky so fast. I remember seeing this quote, and I believe it was from Charles Spurgeon. And he, even though like I was so lost, and if I would have died in those sins in that state, I could not have been. I could not have been. I wouldn't. I know I wasn't saved. I just know I wasn't. But he sees ahead of us. He sees the whole picture. He sees our life stretched out before us. So he knows who's going to be his. So it's like they're both right. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? I really feel that way. It's just like we're both right. Where he knows who is his. He knows who's going to choose him. He knows who isn't. And it reminds me of something that's really hard for me to understand sometimes in scripture when I think about the father hardening Pharaoh's heart. He knew
Mhm.
he would never choose him.
Mhm.
And so I just always kind of think about that. Like, even through all of those terrible things that I had done, I mean, lying, stealing, I mean, drugs, just ridiculous rebellion, he knew I was going to choose him eventually. He knew. And so, but when we think about the frailty of life and how at any moment I could have just whoop, been done, car accidents, drunk driving, I mean, just terrible things that I could have easily have just been completely taken out very quickly. And many of my friends were. And that's also just, I mean, I look back at some of the high school, I mean, friends dying in car accidents, drug overdoses, or in jail for life. I mean, fighting. I mean, there was just so much violence. And so we see how much he's really in it. He's in every fiber of it. And it just makes you all the more grateful. I can't even fathom. There's no amount of gratefulness I could possibly have. That would be good enough to explain. I mean, but that's kind of how I feel about it. It is a hard subject, though. Predestination. It's really sticky.
Amen. You did it justice. Good. I didn't mean to anyway. I knew you could handle it because you've been on this path for a while, right? So you met your husband. How many years ago would that have been?
We're going to be celebrating 20 years this year or
Oh,
next year. Oh, wait. Yes. So July next year will be 20 years for us.
so did you both stayed employed in the same place for a number of years, or what did that look like?
So my husband had already been in the military for a little longer than me. I was brand new. So I had been in maybe, let's see here, almost, I want to say I got on the boat. I mean, I was brand new. I think I was only in for about 6 months. He had been in for almost 2 to 3 years already. And so he was almost on his way out as I was coming in. Again, like, I'm not going to pretend that we were just born again because we definitely weren't. He was raised in a Baptist home, but there was a lack of connection. I think that he had all the motions right, but he still didn't have much of a relationship with God yet. Um, so I wouldn't say I was quite saved until maybe that first prayer in my rack where I was kind of like, okay, I want to figure out what that word repent is, but I'm putting it on the back burner for a little bit. And so then fast forward, I meet him, and then it's like a whirlwind of just instant love, and we're just infatuated with one another, obsessed. We move in together. He proposed after 2 months. And I said yes, like, something else that was super moronic, but it worked out for me. But a lot of people would say that's so crazy. Why would you do that? Um, Even with my own kids, I'm like, them only for 2 months. I mean, I'd probably be like, even though that's my story. And so all his friends thought you were crazy for buying this girl a ring. Like, what are you thinking? He proposed so sweetly. I mean, it was just picturesque. I mean, he literally gave me the proposal of like my dreams. It was on a place called Sunset Cliffs in San Diego, and perfect night. And I remember kind of thinking, okay, can we go home now? Like, can we go back because my bottom kind of hurts. I'm sitting on these rocks. It's pretty. The waves are crashing on these cliffs. It's gorgeous, but you know, let's go. And he's like, no, the sun hasn't set yet. And I was like, oh, well, you want to watch the sunset all the way? And I just thought it was so cute. But I was like, what a cheese ball, That's kind of what I was thinking. And then I turned around to fold the blanket up, and he proposed, and I almost couldn't say no. It was just so beautiful and so sweet. And I was so in love. Like, it was love at first sight. Like, we were just so in love with each other right away. Still are. And so it is very, very, I'm very, very fortunate to have this person. And so then we started but we're both on the boat. We're on the same boat. He's also on the USS Nimitz. And there's some, not issues, but there's a little bit of tug of war going on because I'm pretty much one of the, there's not a lot of women in that field. And so there's a lot of men, and there was a lot of, I don't know what to call it. I mean, there was not jealousy on his part so much, but there's just protection. Like, how am I going to protect you from all of the ship life? Because it is dangerous here. And it was scary for him. It was scary for me. We could get lured in bad situations. If something were to happen on a boat, nobody's going to hear you. I mean, there was just terrible things that went on a boat of that size. And it's very loud, because it's an aircraft carrier. So there's planes landing on it all the time. And it's just a very dangerous place to be. So, we had ended up getting pregnant with our first son. We were engaged for probably 6 months or so before we got pregnant. So not married yet, but being so far from our families, we were like, we don't know how we're going to make this work. His family's in Michigan, my family's in Colorado. How are we going to have a wedding? And so we just quick went to the courthouse and said, this is what we're going to do. And that was great for us. And both families kind of lost out because they were already like, well, where are you going to have the wedding? And neither family was very supportive anyway. So it was just an easy choice. And so now that I'm pregnant, I mean, not that I could say I did this on purpose necessarily, but that was kind of my ticket off the boat because you can't be pregnant on the boat. And the Navy tried really hard to actually get me to abort the baby. Another huge story of corruption there. They also said, oh, you need this shot. They've injected me with all kinds of things. You can't refuse a whole lot. And if you do, you're insubordinate. You could go to captain's mast. There's just a whole big deal. You get put in the naval jail for just saying no. So there was a lot of terrible things that went on. But I eventually got off the boat because they were upset. When you have a new airman getting pregnant, they spent so much on your training, they're upset with you. So it was just pretty rocky. But then I got off the boat and I got placed with all the other pregnant women, which is a kind of a funny story because they put you all together because they're just like ashamed of you. And I was part of the first group that we literally had community service around the base picking up trash. That was our job. And it was very strange. And I remember thinking like, okay, why do they have us picking up trash? Like there's no office work we could do instead. And so I was always just kind of a troublemaker, throwing the book at them, saying there's something else that we should be doing. But anywho, then I had my first son And I had fought really hard to get out of the military. They were threatening me though, because they said, well, your husband's almost out, so he could take care of your son and while you finish the rest of your contract. And I just was not having that. So when you're in the military, when you're dual military, meaning that you're married to your spouse is also in the military, you're deployable at the same time. So you have to sign custody over to somebody else, like a grandparent or something like that. And if you claim you cannot sign custody, then they'll release one of the parents out of service. But they were threatening to release my husband instead of me. And so they had me set to go on deployment within like 3, 4 months of my baby being born. And I was like, there's no way. And I even said, I'll get out dishonorably if that's what it takes, because I'm not leaving my son for 6 to 9 months. Like, there's just no way I'm doing that. And so I actually studied and studied, and I was able to get what they call an OTH, which is a other than honorable but not dishonorable discharge. So then I got out of the military. I was only in for maybe 2.5 years. I think I just barely, almost 3 years, but not quite. And so, yeah, then my husband got out. We moved to Colorado first. And this is where we really started to well, I would say before that in San Diego is when we started to go to church. We started to go to the, light show, fog machine, non-denominational, real hip churches in San Diego. And we were starting to find our faith. We were trying to figure out what we believed. And my husband was trying to explain to me how, the gospel worked, because he knew it front and back. He was raised by, strict Baptist Bereans, and they just, were really good about explaining things for the most part as far as doctrines are concerned. And so we had spent a lot of time at non-denominational churches, and I grew a lot there. I got my first Bible. It was at the Rock Church. I mean, there was something, it was kind of like almost like a Joel Osteen church, but I would say it's not a prosperity church, but it was humongous. And I remember grabbing my first Bible, and one thing that I would say, even though in my rebellion, I loved to read. Reading was always my thing. I could get through books very quickly. I just really enjoy reading. So when I got the Bible, I mean, it was like a sponge. Like, I just could not get enough of this book. Like, I was just eating every day, like just getting into the book. And I was shocked by a lot of it. I was like, whoa, this is crazy. Okay, this is just so fascinating to me. Somebody who didn't grow up that way. So and then over the years, we went from Denver then to Michigan, and, connected with churches. We always try to go to church. And I just remember slowly but surely, it was after my first few times through the book that I started to ask more questions like, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? Like, I loved this sermon. It was really good. It really edified me. But then when I try to go apply it, it seems like everybody in the church gets weirded out by me. Like, I really am taking this very seriously, and the love my neighbor as myself, to really, share the gospel with others. But according to the church, it seemed like sharing the gospel was like, just invite them to church, just, knock on the door and just invite them to church. That's all you got to do. You don't need to worry about really sharing the gospel. You don't want to be like a weirdo, just sharing the gospel with people out of nowhere in an unorthodox way or place. It almost seemed like they were annoyed by that. They just wanted you just invite them to church. Here's an invitation for them. That's what you do. That's what you do. And so I was years of that, and I was like, okay, well, I just got really fed up with it. I just got really weirded out by it. And after about 10 years, I had another pivotal moment where I felt like I didn't really repent from my abortion, which I had figured out what that word meant, by the way. Finally, I was like, oh, this is what it means. That's what I need to do. And so I was very like, oh, goodness, I was on my face repenting. But I remember I said, oh my goodness, I don't know if I've always asked Yah to forgive me of my sins, but I don't think I've ever asked specifically for forgiveness of this sin, because nobody ever talked about abortion. Nobody ever talked about it. You never heard anybody, at least back then, it was just this taboo. Don't talk about it. We're against it, but don't talk about it. And I just don't even remember ever hearing a sermon or anything on it.
Mhm.
Never heard it called murder even. And I remember I read a blog and a lady used that term, abortion is murder. And I remember that was like 2008 or so. And I remember just like, oh, I remember being shocked by that. Like, no, it's not murder. Like, it can't be murder. And I really wrestled with that. Well, then I murdered. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, but I mean, can it really be murder? So I just sort of wrestled back and forth with it. And then I had, terrible dreams. And I remember God was telling me, yes, yes, it is. And, this was an image bearer. And I just was so just struck. I was so, I mean, I cannot even explain the grief. I mean, and this was years, years later. And so I finally repented and I asked God, please just break my heart for this. Please forgive me. And from that time out, I really felt moved to do something more than what I was seeing being done, I guess. So I finally wrote it all out. Like I wrote the testimony of that out, my experience of it, and how it was just, I wrote the whole thing down. And this guy commented on it and he said, I think you'd be interested in abolition work. And I remember it was like, okay, I don't even know what that means. Like, how is that different than being pro life? And he explained the difference between abolition of abortion, people who call themselves abolitionists, and people who are just pro life. And I looked at those two distinct things and I thought, yes, I am an abolitionist. And that could be really, off putting to a lot of people. And there's a lot of wackadoodles. There's going to be wackadoodles everywhere in every movement. There's going to be somebody who ruins it or somebody going too far, or somebody not going about it in love and in biblically. But when I had looked into abolition, I was very moved that this is what I was supposed to do. And so I started just by myself going outside of abortion places and just pleading with the women going in. And a lot of people like to label you as like one of those who are just yelling, you murderers or something. It's like, that's not what it was like. Not in my experience of doing it. It was always more of like this hostage negotiation. Like I just am trying to talk you down. Like I just want to talk you down and talk you out of this, because I really started, the dreams I would have would really show me that it's like they're bringing a baby in, and that was the vision I would have. It's like it's a baby in their arms, and how do we respond to that? If we saw the baby, which Yah sees, we can't see it, but he showed me that that is how you need to respond to this. And so I was very touched and like just moved by that, where I saw the baby, like I saw it, even though it's inside of them, I could see it. And so I would speak to them very gently, like, please don't harm this person. And not just because I don't want the baby harmed, but because I don't want this judgment on you either. And because that's what the judgment was on me, is dying in that sin of murder. And maybe you don't know it's murder, maybe you don't understand. And that's what I would do. I would just try to talk them down. So I was a part of that movement. And I still would say I am very much a part of that movement, although it's kind of broken up over the years, and everybody's kind of gone in their own way, because it was never about business. And that's how we would see the pro-life movement operate. We'd see them operate as a business, asking for money so that they could go fight abortion for you. Where abolitionists were like, no, we might be rogue Christians out here, but we're doing this out of love for our neighbors. We're not affiliated with ministries. We're not affiliated with any business. We're not asking for donations. We just want to love our neighbors as ourselves, and even our tiny neighbors as ourselves. And so we really tried to model, what did the abolitionists of slavery do? And so the abolitionists of slavery really called for complete abolition. They didn't compromise with it. They said no, no slavery, no reconsiderations. It needs to end. And so that's what abolitionists would do. They would just say no compromise, and that could get sticky. Again, there's lots of different things that could, we could raise questions. But during this time, I really separated myself from the institutionalized church because they didn't like what I was doing. My pastor at the time, we had gone from the non-denominational churches to now a smaller Baptist church, because now we were serious Christians. We don't need to be in light shows and fog machines. We're in the smaller church where we're taking our faith more seriously. And but that church that I was at around 7 years or so, they kind of started to get a little ashamed of me. They're like, don't tell anybody you go here, because I had started to making a couple headlines. I had some news I was covered by the news. Sometimes they would come out because I would not only go to abortion places, but I'd go to pride parades. I'd go to me and my son. One of the last things we did, excuse me, one of the last things we did was we went to a drag show. It was like a drag show for kids at a church in South Bend. It was horrific. And my oldest son came with me and got to really, I mean, I was so proud of him. I mean, he just really stood up for the little ones being brought in, in this terrible, I don't mean, it was just terrible. It was quite the scene. But we would do all those things because it was about loving your neighbor and sharing the gospel. That's what it was about. It was about protecting innocence at any stage. And so we would do a lot of that. And the news would end up coming out, and sometimes my face would get plastered places in the most negative way. And then people will just be like, oh, she's that weirdo, who goes to these things. And I would sometimes counter pro-choice rallies. It's honestly, I haven't been called to do it in a long time because it's getting dangerous to the point where he hasn't, if the spirit moves me to do it, I will, but he hasn't in a while. And I have another project in mind later, and I'm just waiting on Yah for that. But for now, that was a wonderful experience of my life where I don't know if you've ever heard of, oops, I hear a screamer. Have you ever heard of Ray Comfort? Have you ever heard of that name before?
I have, and it's ringing a bell, but I can't remember why. Yes,
So
absolutely.
Ray Comfort, I'd say he really pioneered how to engage people in the public square as far as the gospel is concerned. He has lots of cool documentaries on YouTube. One is called Evolution versus God, where he goes and visits all these evolutionist professors, who preach Darwinism and all those
Oh, Ray
things.
Comfort. He does that
Yeah.
survey. He does like, are you a good person?
Right,
Yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. And so we would use his model to really share the gospel. It was just such a great, easy model to use, and you could just bring people right into the gospel. Atheists, even people who, at all different walks, you could just really show them their need for a savior, because most atheists don't believe they need to be saved from anything, right? So it was just such a wonderful method, and so I loved using his method. And what brought me to Torah was a lot of that work out on the streets, in the public square, talking to atheists, homosexuals, pro-choice. I mean, just, people who are just completely opposite of everything I believe, and really engaging with them. And it just became such a great, great practice in sharpening my spirit and discernment on how to love these people and how to see them where they're at. And I remember in the abolitionist world online, I was friends with a girl named Angie, and she had started, and this was probably in 2012, she had started talking about all the Sabbath stuff and all this, feast stuff. And I remember just everybody attacking her, all the abolitionists for attacking her. Everybody, and I was just even kind of joining in here and there on these ridiculous threads. And she's just literally trying to explain what God's teaching her about the Sabbath, and why do we do this and why do we do that? Just normal questions. And I remember just kind of being intrigued, but still like looking at the arguments other people had and being like, yeah, that guy's right. He's right. I definitely, she's gone off. She's gone off a rocker. And I even cheered it on sometimes to my disgust now. I mean, I was like, we'd all pat ourselves on the back thinking we're giving her the truth. This poor lost girl, she's veering off course, and she's fallen from grace and all those things. And I just kind of filed it away, like, and I even unfriended her. I unfriended her because I didn't want to hear about the Sabbath stuff anymore. I didn't want to hear about it because I didn't want to hear about her talking about how my beloved Christmas was pagan. Like, no, we crossed the line, and I unfriended her. And I remember thinking, like, okay, well, I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. And I had this encounter with an atheist, and it was amazing to me. I mean, it's still like, I'm going to try not to cry when I think about it, but it was amazing to me because I'm taking him through the gospel like I always did. This guy was rough, but he was engaging in conversation with us. And I was just like, wow, he really seems to be like, interested. And typically they would just be angry and, spew their hate and then walk away. But this guy was like engaging. And I was like, oh, good. He's like right there, maybe. And so he's just letting me go on and letting me talk and talk and talk about this Jesus and all these things. He's listening to my passion, and he really does feel like I care about him. And so then he goes, what about the fourth commandment? You do that? After I'm bringing him through all the commandments. And
God.
I remember being stunned. I was so stunned. And like, I mean, my heart, I felt like it almost stopped. And only a couple months prior had I been just railing, helping other people rail against this other person. And then it's like, I almost saw, wow, the inconsistency just fall all over me at once. After I'm sitting here patting myself on the back for sharing the gospel with this lost soul, and, just the arrogance. And I stop for a moment and I look and I'm like, okay, well, what have I heard about this? Okay, so let me try to regurgitate all that I remember about why I don't do the Sabbath and why we don't have to do it and all this stuff, how Jesus is our Sabbath now. And let me just regurgitate as much as I can to help save this conversation, from going south because of my blatant inconsistency. And I mean, I almost felt like he's got me. He got me good. And I just did violence. Like, I literally felt like violence to the gospel that day. Like, it was just, oh, and I almost could never forgive myself for that. Cause I'm like, wow, he knew this is why, I mean, what the Christian world puts on, the show it puts on, even though our hearts are in the right place, but our walk isn't matching up. It's not matching up. And it's obvious even to this really rough, tattooed faced atheist man. And I'm just so upset with myself. And so then I finally, and then of course all the things that Angie was saying online was flooding to me at once. And everything she was saying suddenly felt true. It suddenly felt right. And I was shocked. And so then that's when I started to look into it. I was like, why did we go from Sunday to Saturday, from Saturday to Sunday? Why? And then it just sent me down that rabbit hole. And I already hated like the Catholic Church. They already like just, boiled my blood with their blatant idolatry. And just everything was so.
And then you start to quickly see how the Protestant church is not actually very different from all of that.
Yes, yes. And yes, I mean, it was just, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And I think I didn't sleep that night at all. I mean, I think I was up all night with the scriptures and finally seeing myself in Israel, because I always separated it. And so that was really amazing because I felt like God was showing me, this is about you. This is why don't you do this? Why aren't you doing this? Just in the same way you were getting irritated with the modern day institution for not caring enough about abortion or whatever you wanted them to care so much about, you're blatantly not even doing what I'm saying, and the standard, because that's what Ray Comfort talks about a lot, is the standard. If we take away the standard, we have nothing. Then abortion isn't wrong. Homosexuality is not wrong. And that's what I ran into a lot, is that people would say, against what standard? We all just make up our own standard if it's not against the Torah. And so it just all started to click. Everything started to make sense. And the same, passages that say homosexuality is wrong, a couple passages later, it says eating pork is wrong. And I'm just like, ah, my mind is getting blown. And I read this book probably at least, oh my goodness, at least six, seven times by then.
And
And
you have a new pair of glasses to actually see
yes,
what you're reading.
absolutely. It is such a deep fount always, no matter how many times you go through. But I was just wrecked, absolutely wrecked. And so that was my start. That was my start down all this stuff. And I was actually, goodness, I was Mrs. Christmas. Like I loved Christmas so much. I mean, I had magazine worthy scenes all the time for Christmas, Easter. My family would fly in for these events. And like it was one of the craziest things that were, I mean, thinking and seeing it for the first time for what it was. And I was revolted, and it could only be a work of the spirit to cause this lady who loved all the Christmas things to be revolted. And another pinnacle moment was during Easter time, which was my favorite time. I actually liked it more than Christmas time. Because I mean, we always watched the Passion. We had our own traditions where we would just, everything we did, me and my husband with our children, totally different than my secular upbringing. My secular upbringing was all about Santa and Easter Bunny. And my mom was a massage therapist, so she had a lot of crunchy, new agey friends, and they were all like really into Easter. And I remember filing those things away, and they'd be like, "Oh, you're gonna go get your Easter baskets." They're always excited for us to go Easter egg hunting, and so I remember, looking back on things like that, and so I remember telling, my husband was like, "It is all about Christ. It is, Easter is all about Christ. Christmas is all about Christ." And that's the only thing we ever celebrated. We never, ever did Santa in our house. We never did Easter bunnies in our house. We knew those things were wrong. But it was just such a hard thing to reconcile growing up secular and saying, wow, so secular people do this, but Christians do this, pretty much the same traditions. Pretty much everything's the same, except for we slap a little "This is for Christ" on it. And that was just a huge contrast for somebody who grew up secular, where I was able to see far more clearly, I think, than my husband was, because he just grew up it always being about Christ, where I grew up where it wasn't about Christ at all. And no influence around me. I remember even thinking the churches didn't even put nativity scenes out during Christmas in this liberal area. Like it was still like, come see Santa at churches even. It was just very interesting. And so when I finally, when we decided, okay, I'm going to kind of see this for what it is, and I started to work on my husband a little bit because he was like, nope, you can't take away Christmas. And I remember even Halloween. I mean, we were really into Halloween too. I mean, I even did it as Christ centered as I could, which sounds stupid now.
Did the holiday stuff happen after your realization about the Sabbath and maybe some food stuff, or was the holiday stuff before?
Yeah, it definitely took some time. It took about 3 to 4 years before we even started implementing anything, because that was the struggle. That's how deep the struggle was. That was how deeply entrenched we were, because we thought for sure we're making it about Jesus. We are making it about him. It is not, it never has been about the secular thing. So it was harder to see the error, even though I felt it and I knew it. And there's books I read. Come Out of Her, My People was a really great one to help me see Christmas for what it was. And then, of course, it wasn't until I had stumbled upon the Way documentary and showed that to my husband that we finally made the shift. But I had been convicted again years prior, like most women before their husbands. I was very convicted because with Ray Comfort, he also had Halloween tracks. They were like $100 bills with a big pumpkin on it. And we would every Halloween do gospel tracks. So we really were very puffed up in our outreach to the lost. And I think it could be such a blinder for the truth, because you don't see your error, even though you are literally participating and practicing and joining in, that an atheist sees you no different than him. And that's what I was really struggling with, is like, okay, we're doing the exact same thing. So even though I feel like I'm doing God's work and I'm being the hands and feet, the world is actually very numb to the Jesus marketing because that's kind of what it is. It's like, Jesus loves you. Jesus loves you. It's like, yeah, 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 yeah. They've heard that. Your life is what your testament's going to be, your fruit, not your slogans. And that's what it started to become. They're just slogans. They're not cutting to the heart because you're having a pig roast outreach, event, which we did often at the Baptist church. They would do pig roast all the time. And that was a huge outreach with a bouncy house in front. And it was just always this crazy tradition that I look back on now and I'm like, oh my
Why
goodness.
is it always pig? We had the same thing, sausage and pig. Why is it never cow or chicken? Why is
I
it
know.
pig?
It's intentional. And that's what's so bizarre is like and once the veil and the scales fall off, you're just mortified
Mm.
at the blatant disregard. All the while thinking you are so like spiritually in line and you're still far gone and not understanding. And so that's where the arrogance comes in because you really do think you have great understanding. That's what I thought. I had great understanding. I've gone through this book. I've gone through it numerous times. I have great understanding of it. I did all of these studies. I've done all of these things. And it was just, it actually brought more arrogance than anything. Where the more you read, the more humbled you should get. Where I think in today's church, the more they read, the more arrogant they get. Or the more they play into their doctrines, the more arrogant they get. Because especially when it came to loving the lost, where loving the lost to them meant get them in the church, get them in the seat, and that's how we'll help them. But until then, we're not going to help them. And that was very upsetting to me. So, um, and so, yeah, we took the plunge after we watched the Way documentary. My husband was very cut to the heart after that. He started to finally, it explained to him what I was trying to explain, but it kind of always would end in like this annoying argument. Um, and so I would just kind of keep quiet and just pray. Um, we went through a lot over the years because, like I said, we had a child very young. He was 19, I was 20 when we had our first son, just getting out of the military, struggled, just like any, young family does at first. And then we went on to have three sons. And then we kind of settled down. We're like, okay, we're good with these three boys. And then my husband actually had a dream because I actually had a very traumatizing birth with my third son. I thought I was going to die, terrible hemorrhaging. It was just a very terrible experience. And I was like, I am never getting pregnant again. Like, we are done having babies, and I'm good with these three boys. And so he respected that. And then he started having dreams. He started having dreams that we were going to have a girl. And I was like, well, that's nice, but I'm not getting pregnant again. So it's going to stay a dream for you. And, but eventually he kind of convinced me, oh, just one more time. And I was like, okay. And my son, kind of got into his toddler years. You want that new little baby again. You're like, all right, let's go ahead. You start to forget all the trauma you went through before. And so then and it was a girl, and I was surprised. I was like, wow. I mean, I would have been okay with another boy, but it was a girl. And we were very, very happy. And I had a much better experience because I actually studied about birth and I had watched documentaries and I actually understood it and had a much better experience in the hospital, though, because my husband was like, no home births. We're not doing anything crazy like that. Those are for weirdos. We're not doing those things. And so then he actually got a vasectomy after my daughter. And I had kind of bullied him into it, honestly, because I was like, I'm not getting on birth control. I'm not doing that. And we need to not have any more babies because I'm tired and I'm just kind of done. And so he's like, okay, and I didn't really think he was going to do it, but he did. And I was kind of shocked. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So then I kind of felt relief, but at the same time, a huge amount of grief because I was like, what happened? I mean, why do I feel so sad? I mean, oh well, it'll go away, and it just didn't go away. I was like, oh, I felt like the Holy Spirit was just like gnawing at me and nagging, and like I was just so grief stricken, like I was experiencing a death, and I couldn't really figure out why. And so then I mentioned it to him, and he was like, well, that's, I'm not undoing it. And he was very adamant. I'm like, I'm not undoing it. So I left it alone. I said, I'm going to submit to him, whatever he wants. I'm not going to nag. I'm not going to mention it anymore. And about a year later, and I just prayed, for our convictions to align. And about a year later, he just kind of said that, children are a blessing, and maybe we shouldn't have did this. And I was like, oh my goodness. I remember thinking like, because he was so adamant about not ever undoing it. But then we found a ministry actually that does it for a lot cheaper. And I don't know if you want to get a cheap reversal, but it was amazing that this guy, it was his ministry to right wrongs, as he called
Sure.
it.
Do you by any chance know Sherwood Cook? You must know
That
Sherwood.
kind of sounds familiar.
He's all over. He's great. He's fantastic. And
Okay.
my husband interviewed him and I interviewed his wife.
Mhm.
They also had a big regret of their vasectomy.
Yeah.
He also found a ministry that reversed it. So
It
uh,
might be the same one.
they live in Florida, but I do remember that they did travel somewhere so that he could get it.
Yeah, my husband had to travel.
Yeah, wow.
So,
What a ministry.
yeah, it was called the Reversal Clinic. Um, I think it's a reversalclinic.com. And many people after us, after hearing our story of regret, they also went to go undergo their reversals. And it was just a wonderful domino effect in our lives, watching all the people also convicted through our testimony. And honestly, we we decided in our heart that we are not going to do this to have all the babies. We're not going to do this to just have as many babies as we possibly can. We're going to do this to as an act of repentance before God, and to be obedient to what we feel like He's pressing upon us. And if we don't have children, it is part of the consequence of mutilating your body. And we were okay with that. We said, that's what happens when you make bad choices. We have to sit with that choice, but we need to still repent. And so that was at the forefront of our mind. So we didn't get pregnant for a while, and we just were okay not getting pregnant. Like, we just figured it probably didn't work, and that's okay. Um, and then I think about 2 years later, let's see here. I think it was actually maybe not quite 2 years. But we ended up getting pregnant, and now we have four more kids. So this is now our eighth kid, and we are just we're in awe. We're just in awe of. I never would have thought I'd have this many kids. I love them all so much, and I never thought that I'd be a mother of multiple children. I always kind of looked at women who had more than four. I remember thinking four was like over the top. that was pretty much over the top. And I just always thought, wow, those women are something else. Never thought that'd be me, but I love it. I love it so much. Yah changed my heart towards children. Um,
Between the ages of what and what?
so I have an 18-year-old, and then I have a 20-month-old, and then I'm pregnant. So it's
You're
gonna be,
pregnant. What?
yep. Yeah,
Ah!
we're pregnant with our eighth, and so that's just wonderful. And I just can't believe it. I really can't. I'm just like, out of the actually all seven, this eighth one was the only one we could say, wow, that was kind of a surprise. So we didn't really plan for another one so fast, but it keeps happening. And over the years of really trying to help women understand birth and how to really nourish their bodies and pull away from the systems, it's like the healthier I've become. And I see more women just vibrant as they get away from these systems that are keeping them infertile, that are keeping them malnourished and drugged. And I mean, I had a few miscarriages in between because of all the naval, injections and things that we have to recover from. So I'm just very passionate about things like that as well. So I kind of sneak those things in. I call it my propaganda into some of my magazine work, because I really want people to know how to do this, how to nourish themselves so they could have, I mean, and it's always going to be at Yah's will. And that's what needs to be at the forefront of everybody's mind. If it's His will, it will be done. And if not, we shouldn't be stonewalling blessings. We should be accepting them. But if not, He's still good. And so,
Hallelujah. Wow, I had no idea you were pregnant. That's so that I was just at a client's house tonight and she has three boys that are very and we had this conversation. She was talking about the fact that her husband does not have a vasectomy, and it's like scandalous here in Quebec because 3 kids is
Oh,
already
wow.
kids. And
Yeah.
I just told her the story that I just told you about these people
Oh,
who had their vasectomy. Um,
yeah.
I can't even believe that. That's so funny. And it is
Yeah.
when we want to get pregnant or not, it happens when he wants it to, and those
Right.
I have one dear sister who they adopted kids. She had PCOS. She thought she would never have children. They adopted like 4 kids, and then she was, I
Wow.
think, in her late 30s or 40s and had 2 more kids
Oh,
naturally.
wow.
Like they didn't
Wow.
could have the
Yeah.
age off, but like for whatever reason, he did not want them to have kids until
Isn't that
Sarah.
something?
Like it's the story from the beginning.
Yes. Yes. Where he could take all the credit, and it's amazing. And I really just believe to my core that it is holy ground, and it's something we shouldn't be messing with. And I always hear later, a lot of older women have so much regret. I wish I had more, or I wish I didn't prevent, and things like that. And I understand how overwhelmed a mother could be with 3 or 4 kids. It is definitely, you're in the thick of it. I mean, you're in the trenches and it could get scary in there, but it passes so fast. And I don't want people to live in those regrets where I see so many families where they'll have 2 kids and they're overwhelmed. So they halt everything to whatever means they want. And then they can't have a third. They're trying and they're trying and they can't have a third. And then I have a friend who has only one and she can't have a second. And then I have friends who have 4, but they can't have a fifth. It is all his doing. And so it's like we can't demand blessings when we want them, but we feel fine preventing them. And so that's just such holy ground to me where I'm like, oh, I just kind of fall to my knees like, your will be done if this is what you want me to do. Then
Oh,
I'm the vessel
I'm
for all
so
the little
excited
people.
for you. And I was just saying too, I'll say this, and I'll probably regret saying it because people will listen to your testimony, but I had the baby on my hip and I was doing her dishes,
Mm.
this kind of stuff. And I said, oh man, like I'm almost 42. And
Yeah.
Jesse doesn't have any kids. I have kids from my previous marriage who are
Mhm.
14 now. And as
Oh.
soon as we separated, my ex went and got a vasectomy. But he was done, and like I had always wanted many kids, and it just that was
Mm.
and now I'm married to this younger man who does not have any kids, who loves my kids like his own, but we're in 2 separate countries. So anyway,
Oh.
that whole but I mean, then I'm like, okay, I'm not Sarah yet, but like by the time we're in the same country, like, anyway,
Oh.
it,
Oh, I would definitely just see what Yah does. I mean, that would be my only advice. I know it's scary. I'll be 40 this year. So I mean, even that, I mean, if I were to go into, I mean, I don't know if I've mentioned this, but um, my births, my last 3, well, let's see here, no, Selah or Daniel, Selah, yeah, my last 3 births were unassisted births. And so if I were to go in now, I mean, I'd be high risk, to them, and I get all the things. And so I really believe that Yah is the best midwife possible, and it does take a lot of trust. And I'm never going to tell you it's for everybody, but it can be the most beautiful thing at any age. And
I
I've watched it. I've watched it happen.
think we've had that conversation. I was a doula until
Oh
COVID,
yeah.
and I got kicked out of the hospitals and that all that
Oh
stuff.
wow. Yeah. It's hard to be a doula there.
I saw, yeah, and that's unfortunately that's where doulas are most needed, but it was like
Yes.
we're like
Yeah.
this last client, I never went back to the hospital again. She's on her
Mm,
back, contracting, they're putting the
mm,
PCR test up her nose, they're
mm.
forcing a mask on her. And
Oh
then
my God.
shortly after that, I was not jabbed, so I was not even welcome in the hospital, but I wouldn't
Wow.
have gone anyway. It is not, as we know, it's not the place to have a baby, right? It's a place.
Right. It is. It is a huge, huge risk. And I mean, that's why my heart just breaks for that oppression. It's just an oppressive place. And this is where things could start going underground pretty quickly. And so that's what another thing that I've been trying to advocate for is even here in the States, you know, people get afraid to not have their records or what we should do. And we're learning that Yah protects us no matter where we are.
There is
And
something
so,
to be said about, who know Babylon could be so many things, but I think
mhm.
systematically checking out where we can is what we're supposed to be doing. And
Absolutely. And I do believe there's a covering there. And even I always kind of said, like when we read in scripture, there's so many accounts of people being thrown in and out of the prisons. And that's something we may need to get accustomed to and be ready for. And although that's like, oh, that's such an overwhelming thought. He's right there with us. Probably more so, right? Than in our plenty and in our
I
comforts.
kind of envision it, right? The amount of
Yeah.
like times I kind of play through these potential scenarios without getting too freaked out, where I still feel this like wild peace.
Yes, isn't it something? They had to have had it. They had to have had it. Even more joy. It's so amazing to me, and that's why it's almost welcome to me. I'm like, if I were to have a baby this way, and I think of the worst case scenario, somebody calling on me or whatever the situation would be, I would know that I have my body, my baby's best interest at heart. I did good by my God. And if they want to persecute me for it, then I guess this is what Yah wants me to go through and endure. I do believe He's in full control of all of it, even all the persecution that'll come our way. And I felt that when I was doing a lot of ministry in the streets. I remember at a pride parade, they get the mob mentality. And I just read, years ago in Canada, somebody got arrested for doing exactly what I used to do. Right there on the street. He got arrested for just sharing the gospel at a pride parade. And I was thinking, oh my goodness. And it really hit me that I could get arrested one day for this, and really letting that sit. Are
Well,
you
it is
still
hate speech
willing?
now, right? Like the Bible is more and more becoming the word of God is hate speech, right? Especially,
Absolutely. Yeah. It's just, how dare you? And it's so offensive. The more offensive it gets, it could be scary, but we know that he's going to rise up that remnant and because it's never me. And that's what I loved about the work is like, I'm an outgoing person. I'm not at all introverted. I love talking. My husband would say I talk enough for both of us, so he's quiet. But I just love to be outgoing. But anytime I was out in a really terrible situation, in the Pride Parade, where I willingly put myself, and people are swarming, they get the mob mentality, they start spitting, cussing, and it gets kind of scary where you're thinking somebody's could just hit me with something, or I could, and you just feel his protection all the more. It was amazing. And he's like, I remember speaking and not even remembering what I was saying, and I remember thinking, what did I say? Because it was just like a calm came over people when I would talk to them. But I don't really remember what I was saying. And I would try to recall to tell my husband what happened. And like a lot of people would be like, well, why didn't your husband go with you? I'm like, he would not do good in those situations. He's kind of a tough guy, and not that he has an anger never has an anger issue, but he's like very protective. And so if anybody starts cussing at him, spitting at him, it may not go well. And so he would always just like, pray for me, and he would be there, like outside of it, kind of watching on the edge. But it just was not. That's why I was so grateful my son came with me the other time, because he really and I did raise my kids outside of abortion clinics. Unfortunately, they got to see, because I wanted them to see what abortion was. I didn't want anybody to lie to them about what it was, because that's what the world's going to do. They're going to lie to your kids
oh, it's
that
the
it's
most wonderful
nothing.
thing. It's almost a rite of passage.
Yeah, yeah, it is. And I remember even when I was taught in school what an abortion was, it does not. They barely touch on the subject. And that's why you hear the same rhetoric all the time. It's just a clump of cells. It's just a clump of cells. Because that's what they teach you, and you just get you keep repeating the lie. You just believe it. And so I did raise them out there, and they got to see a lot of terrible things, unfortunately, but I never put them in direct danger. I always tried to use good discernment. We'd always bail if something got weird, something got too much.
You have to.
Um,
I'm sure you do have success stories. Like you ever watch a woman turn around and get back in her car?
Yes, yes. There, I mean, I wish I could say it happened more often, and I always just pray that, if it did, that they would be safe. But there was quite a few times actually. We had, I mean, the stories are always heartbreaking because it's not like, most women, I will say personally, they're very proud to get an abortion. They're yelling at you, yeah, yeah, yeah. They don't care. They're hurting deeply, but they are just trying to justify themselves. I know that they're hurting. Um, and because I remember when I had mine, I just wish there was somebody there to tell me what my heart already knew. Even though I wasn't even saved yet, I knew it was wrong. And I knew, like, man, if there was just somebody here to say, don't do this, maybe I wouldn't have done it. Um, and that's what I want to be for that person. Just don't do this like that, because I know their heart's already telling them it's wrong. Even if it's really suppressed, you know.
It's like the
And so,
opposite of normalizing it, right? Like everybody around you is normalizing it and could just take
yes,
one person and be like, no, what you're feeling is the truth. This is not,
right. Right. And it's just to really confirm that for them, just confirm what their heart is already telling them. And so we had a lot of great success stories. There was a woman who turned away. Now, I would go outside of Maryville, Indiana, which was a late term abortion place. It was about an hour and a half from my house. So it would be like an all day event. We would go. And this place was, we would have PTSD when we left. It would just be, we would see
yeah,
visible bumps going
I'm a
in.
little bit sick to ask you. I just don't have a point of reference. What exactly, how many weeks is late term?
So it's 20 weeks to like 39 weeks. That would be late term.
They,
Yeah. It'd be after 20 weeks. So it was very, very sickening to see. And outside of this one, in particular, they had a off-duty police officer there trying to intimidate us with arrest all the time. And so it was always just very disturbing to watch. But we had a lady who, one of my first turnaways, was having twins, and they had not told her she was having twins, because when you're a late term, and she wasn't quite, like, she was maybe 17 weeks or so, if I remember, but she thought she was just having one baby. But then when she found out she was having two, they didn't tell her, but she went to a woman's care center, which is like a crisis pregnancy center, and found out she was having two, but then was still really like, I'm gonna be all alone. The guy is like, I don't even know where he is, and I don't know if I could do this. My mom is on drugs. My dad is like abusive. It was just, again, just a very terrible situation. And she's just like, I don't have anybody to help me. And we were like, we will help you. Like, we are here. We will help you. We don't, and she was like, you guys don't even know me. And we were like, we don't care. We will help you. And we did. We started a fund for her to get an apartment down payment or a deposit on an apartment. She was able to, and we still have contact with her. And these babies now are, goodness, I think they're 11, I want to say. And so that was one of my favorite stories. That was my first turn away. And then there was another lady, Patricia. There's always a handful of them. I wish I could say it was a lot, but it's not. So I have a handful of people who I'm not sure if they went back, but they turned away that day. They may have gone back, but they were convicted. And I just pray they didn't go back. And we just, only God knows, really. There was another lady, Patricia. She was an older mom, in a very, again, abusive situation, but didn't want to get an abortion. It's always the people who don't really want to. But more often, honestly, we saw a lot of women very proud. And of course, what you have out there are other women. They're called escorts. They will escort you in with their little umbrellas to shield you from the horrible people telling you not to do this. And they are really egging them on and trying to, just comfort them into this decision. And so the whole point to me was to not let them do it in peace, to stir it up enough to stir the heart. And it was always very hard, but it was always very gratifying work because I knew the Father wanted me to do it.
It's so incredible because I hear just the love coming from you and like abortion is something thankfully I've never had to deal with personally on my own, even though I have been around people and even accompanied close people to me to have it
Mm,
many years ago.
mhm.
But I see, I just, anyway, abortion is not on my mind often because it's just another,
Right.
but I haven't kind of revisited these thoughts,
Mhm.
many years. And just, I know that in the past, my feminist self who brought her kids to drag queen story hour,
Mhm.
like, I would have hated somebody like you for,
Yeah.
how dare you take away that woman's right, and
Right.
I'm just like, I
Yeah.
feel the love coming from you and how,
Mhm.
like, I just feel like it's such a beautiful, like, I'm almost like,
Mhm.
oh, is this what I want to go do? Like, you're pumping me up. It sounds like it's really such a beautiful,
Mm,
edifying,
yeah.
at
Mm,
least effort to change that person, the lives of those two people that you're talking to.
yeah. And there was more. I can't really remember all of them, but I just and that was kind of the point too, is I really want I know that maybe I'm at a stage where I'm passing the baton off to the next person. And maybe he'll have me go back and do it again. I kind of mentioned the other project I was thinking about earlier. And that he's been impressing upon me is now that I feel like I've done a lot of work with like the heathens and the lost and really practice so much with speaking to them. I want to come after the church now. I really want to come after and not pick it because that's what it'd probably look like. But I want to come after the church and just say, what is sin? And I've even made my big grand sign already. That's already just sitting in my garage. I don't know if I'm ever going to be moved to take it out and be ready for those conversations again. But I feel like Yah's really impressing upon me to go to the churches.
Oh, girl, that's
And
even scarier territory because their
it
demons
is.
do not
I
want
would say I'd
to
probably
look
deal with
good.
an atheist,
They want to
Satanist
eat their
every day.
bacon. You don't take their bacon and pork away from them, Jenna. That's
It
the
is really
doctrine.
actually scares me more. It does, and I do kind of like I kind of I don't want to cower at it because I know that if he wants me to go, I'll have really no choice. The spirit won't stop nagging and nagging. I call the spirit a nag sometimes because I'm like, oh, stop nagging me. All right, until I go, and then it's like this. It's like a relief, and that's what it feels like. It feels like okay, I obeyed, even though that was the hardest thing. Because when you're there and when you actually go do it, and this is what I encourage people to do, when you actually just go, when you get your feet and you walk and you just put yourself out there and you go and do it, you will feel more protected than you ever have. I mean, I cannot really express that enough. In the darkest places, I felt the most protected because I knew it was what he wanted me to do. And of course, the enemy wants to throw stories in your face about the person who may not have been protected. But even in that, it's Yah's will. To me, I'm like, if he wants me here, and to die is gain, right? So that's got to be at the forefront of our minds. And that's what the enemy hates when you really get to that point where you understand to die is gain. So what do you got to lose? What do you got to lose? How many people can you bring along with you? How many people are you going to touch in your life? And I pray that that would be the reward at the end. Can I see who I may have touched in my short little time here? Can I hear the testimony by the power of the testimonies, right? I just want, like, that's the reward and that's the drive. Like, that's what drives us to go do it. So who cares? Who cares what they say about you? Who cares? I mean, I had so many people tell me that, oh, you're doing it wrong, especially the Christians. They hated it. And I found that to be most peculiar, that the religious people are the ones who, they don't like the word religious because we have a relationship. We're not religious. But then they act very religious, because the people who really want a genuine relationship, who are being moved by God, they don't like that. The Christians don't like that. They tell you you're doing it wrong, you're going about it wrong. And I'm like, well, how should I do it? Just invite them to church. And that's all the answer you'll ever get, you know? And it's just so peculiar. It's the most peculiar thing so I can't share the gospel like just at the mall, you know, if it's not affiliated with the
Tell me,
church.
what is the end goal? Is the end goal to share the gospel or to get a butt in the seat to pay the tithes?
Right. Yeah, the tithe that's in the Torah that you know,
Right
it's
there
all
in
just so,
Leviticus, right beside why it's bad to be gay and it's
yes,
good to tithe. And that's all we need
right,
to learn from this whole book.
right. It's like just let's keep picking. I like that one, don't like this one. Like that one, don't like this one. And that's just what you start to see so clearly, right? It's amazing. It's like, oh, and they don't like that ever exposed. That's really hard. It's hard, but I really do think that there's going to come a time where the harvest is going to be really ripe, and I feel like it's getting there. I mean, even with the Charlie Kirk thing, like people's eyes started to turn towards why did he do that? Oh, maybe I should look into doing that. When you get these really influential people, out there who are starting to see things, they're like, okay, maybe now's the time to swoop in and talk about why we shouldn't do this. And I almost think what's sad is that the Torah, honestly, is actually easy. It's the easy part. I think what the church was doing was the more harder part. It was understanding the more spiritual aspects of things. It was understanding that all these things were just a shadow, and but that doesn't make the shadow unimportant. It makes it actually very important. Just like you would shadow somebody at work, right? You don't shadow them to throw out the training. You're shadowing them to learn, and that's the whole point of it. And so that I always found that so peculiar when they say, "Oh, we do away with those because it's just a shadow. It's unimportant now." And I'm like, I actually think that's what makes it important. That's the very reason. It's the substance that we were. So they have the substance, but they're perverting it because they forgot the easy part. Like not committing physical adultery is probably easier than not thinking about adultery. And same thing with murder. It's a lot easier to not go out and murder somebody, right? It's probably pretty easy for most of us to do that. But it's really hard to
Very
not hate somebody.
the wild thing for the people who do fixate on the New Testament is he actually
Mm.
leveled everything. He actually made it more difficult. He didn't,
Yes.
you know,
Yes, he really did.
calling yourself an abolishist. Is that how do you say it?
Abolitionist.
Abolitionist. Sorry, I speak two languages, so sometimes my uh,
Oh,
I was
hmm.
thinking of, well, just the word abolish and how it's
Yeah.
just at the forefront of all of this of what it means to abolish something or not.
Right, right. I mean, to abolish would be to cut off, and he said the opposite. I mean, I remember thinking that was one of the first verses I went to when I in prayer, in deep prayer, was to I did not come to abolish, and abolish was a big word for me, and I was like, yes, because I would want to abolish, other things, right? So he's saying he doesn't come to abolish this. And what is he speaking of here? And then who's going to be the least and who's going to be the greatest? Are these commandments different? Is Yeshua's commandments different than Moses' commandments? It was just it didn't make sense to somebody who had gone through the scriptures so much because there was no distinction between commandments, and it just made perfect sense that nope, you guys have got it wrong. The mainstream has got it wrong, and I think the harvest is going to be ripe, and I pray that everybody, well, at least some people are called to put their hand to the plow and share. That's what I think this whole thing has been prepping us for, so that we will, that royal priesthood, that we could be teachers to those who get hungry. Because I think there's going to be a lot of people hungry soon, a lot of people, and they're going to need teachers to show them, and hopefully good ones.
There are so many people that I left behind in church. I had a wild, traumatic, weird thing as
Mm,
to, and
mm,
there are a handful of them that if, I was very much demonized by the church, and people
mm,
made stuff up about me, and
mm.
a handful of people that, oh my gosh, if they could just, my arms are wide open, guys.
Yeah.
Like,
Hmm.
if you come back and say, oh wow, Jenny, I think you might actually have been right. What do you know?
Yeah.
Oh, I cannot wait to tell you what I
I
know.
know. And just be anticipating it, because I really, it may not be all of them, even if it's just one. That one will bring so much joy. And we feel what Yah feels when one sinner repents, because it's like, oh my goodness, the joy. That's why we all are just so hungry for the like-minded, because we're like, we all repented and humbled ourselves before, that, which is so much harder to say, hey, I didn't get this right. Everything I was taught wasn't true. not everything, but a big portion. And I thought I was living such a spirit-filled life, not disregarding the attempt to be close. But when we really start to decide those things don't matter, that's a heart posture. That's a heart posture of rejection and saying those things don't matter. So that is in itself, you are not spiritually mature for him, for your walk right yet. It's still in the baby stages. If you could read something and say, not for me, that was for them at that time, and not to just obey the word as a child would. As a child would read it. Like if I were to give my kids a list of rules for when I was gone, and one of the kids said, Mom doesn't mean that one like that. And they distorted, the other kids distorted, oh, she must have meant it like this. It's the same thing. If the little kids are like, no, I just should probably do exactly what it says. I don't want to hear your commentary on why I shouldn't, because that's what it is. And I remember my father-in-law when I first started, which that's, it's such a sad situation on that side of the family, because that we are kind of going through a bit of a shunning, in a sense, because they feel like we're lost, we're under a deceptive spirit, and we all because we. I took Christmas away, and I think that was the main problem, because I did, like I said, all the Christmas things. And so now that they're doing it on their own, they're feeling a little lost, and Jenna always did these things, and now we got to figure out who's doing who's cooking who's doing this. And I was kind of the hostess with the mostess. I had everything planned and everything put together and all the fun traditions, and I took it away. And so there's a lot of resentment there, I think, anyways. And I think that we all, when we're spirit filled, we just want reconciliation. That's all we want is what do you want me to do to reconcile? And then we just come to terms with the other person doesn't want to reconcile, so we have to wait. And I will always wait. But I remember my father-in-law, when I was first asking questions, because he was always kind of my mentor, as a new Christian, I'd call him and saying, hey, what does this mean? Or how would you explain this? And I'd show him the verse that I was kind of struggling with, and he'd always have a great explanation for me. And then I started to ask, about the Sabbath and all those things. And I felt like those are very simple questions, far more simple than what I would have asked in the past. And he started to get very irritated with me. And then finally he gave me a book like this thick on dispensationalism. And he's like, it'll explain everything. Just read this book here, and then that'll just explain it all. And so I was like, okay. Didn't get around to reading the whole thing. Sorry, some of my teens are home. Probably just like, hi. And it's got done from working out. um, but yeah, so and I just think it's really wonderful when you start to kind of pass up people in a sense. And I felt like that's what was happening, is that I was so hungry. They were waiting for my fire to kind of peter off. And they're like, oh, she's just a new Christian. She's on fire for now, but she'll settle in. She'll settle in line with the rest of us. And it just never happened. She's still on fire after 20 years. What's wrong with her? She's just a radical lady. And he was just hoping I would just settle in, become my little church lady, volunteer in the children's ministry, shut up and cook the food and do the things. And that's what I needed to do. I don't need to be asking so many questions.
He had bigger plans for you, and he still has more and more plans. I can see that's very, very cool.
Oh, well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jenna. This time absolutely flew by. It's been such a pleasure, and congratulations on your
Thank
magazine,
you.
on your new baby that's on the way, and
Thank you.
that you've got going. And thank you so much for everything
Thank
that you
you.
do.
All right. Thank you for having me. And I just pray that you have many more great interviews and get to share all the wonderful testimonies.
Yeah, it's a blessing. I can't. This is like the coolest gig ever. I can't even believe. Thank you
So fun. Well, have a good night.
Bye.